There are thousands of AI app ideas floating around, but most of them will make you absolutely no money. I run an AI coding agency that builds apps for clients and generates $250,000 per month, and I've personally built dozens of apps, tested hundreds of ideas, so I know exactly what separates the apps that print money from the ones that waste your time. I'm going to rank 18 different app ideas that you can build with no coding skills right now. So we have a list of 21 different apps that I'm going to rank from the best apps being S all the way down to F being do not try them. And I'm going to explain why I would go about doing and ranking each one. So let's start off with Habit Tracker. Now, a habit tracker is one of the most probably oversaturated niches there are right now. There are probably like 20 different habit tracking tools that I can think of. And the thing with these is that they are very hard to distinguish, right? At the end of the day, and habit tracking is pretty straightforward. You have ability to create and then track your different milestones and habits. And so it makes it really hard to distinguish. And so for that reason, I'm going to be putting this one at a D. Now, the reason that it's not an F is that I think if you do have a really intuitive sense around product, and you have a really good ability to go to market, I think that there's probably an angle to put here, because obviously people are still building these apps. While they are commoditized, you can come up with a very creative or niche down version of the existing habit tracking apps that exist and potentially win a slice of the market. And so for that, I'm going to put this at D. Obviously, it's also very easy to build, which is another factor as well. And I purposely selected all these apps to be very easy to vibe code using AI tools like Lovable. So keep that in mind throughout this whole process. But that there's a few good ones at the end that I want you to think about building that I'm saving for the end. So the next one on this list is a workout planner. Now, there are quite a lot of these in the market as well. I don't think there's one that's probably the main one, but I think there's quite a few big players in the space that also make it quite competitive. It's a bit harder to build than the habit tracker as well, given that it's more feature rich, needing to track, different workouts and upload those to a database. And so it's definitely more technically advanced, but again, similar to the habit tracker, you probably could figure out a way to differentiate, maybe market to a more specific niche. For example, instead of going towards gym bros as a whole, maybe you could go towards calisthenics or something a little more niche. That way you can garner an audience there. And so I would probably put this one again at D. The reason it's probably the same is because I do think that you could create one that's maybe more niche down to calisthenics or something that's more niche that people haven't thought about in the workout kind of realm. But again, I think it's quite competitive, a little bit more technically challenging to build. The next one on this list is Calorie Tracker. So obviously we have MyFitnessPal, which does, I believe, $300 million a year. We have CalAI, which does, I believe, $3 million a month. So these are some big players in the space. Now, again, this is pretty technically complex. You need to have all different features, from image analyzing to barcode scanning to all the different things that go into tracking your calories and macros. For all these reasons, and again, I think even on the go-to-market side of things, I think CalAI has done a really good job here, which makes it even harder to compete. And so I'm going to put this one in our F tier, if it lets me. Oh, don't want to do that. So this is going to be our first F tier one. Again, super competitive. I think it's hard to distinguish. I think that product-wise and functionality-wise, almost everything has been tried at this point. And so this is going to be an F for me. The next one is a mood journal. I think that this one is interesting because I think there's a really strong trend right now when it comes to journaling. And I think that with some kind of elegant, minimal experience, if you bring AI into that, there could be an interesting way of elevating that kind of note-taking experience, potentially allowing people to set goals as they journal, potentially tracking their mood over time, potentially being able to create content around it for content creators. I think the niche is really hot right now when it comes to journaling and goal setting and all this kind of stuff. And I think you can create really interesting content around it. And so I'm going to put this one at a B. Now, I think the important factor for this one is that you build a really intuitive and simple experience. Otherwise, you're going to be caught between all the other mood journals out there. Okay, the next thing on this list is sleep tracking. This one seems very tough to me off the bat because you're going to have to connect with some kind of sleep wearing device, whether that's an Apple Watch, we have the Whoops now, Oura Ring, maybe the 8 Sleep mattress. So these are all things that go and actually allow people to track sleep. And potentially you could build a better experience on top of those, but I think for the most part, this has been done pretty well. I think there probably is some angle around potentially even not needing to use these tools and maybe building something that generally tracks your sleep schedule and, you know, a nighttime routine and a morning routine and things that maybe go along with sleep. But I feel like the people that are super sleep optimized are already, using one of these devices, and the people that aren't as sleep optimized tend not to care as much. And so you're kind of playing within this really narrow audience of people kind of in between. And so I'd probably put this one a C, just because I think it's going to be pretty challenging both to build and to kind of appeal to an audience. But I do think there is some kind of creative strategy here you could do to optimize on the people that may want the benefits of a structured routine around sleep. The next one on this list is a finance tracker. Now, I think this one is probably the toughest build on this list. Now, in order to build this, you're going to have to connect with banks, credit cards, any financial products that people are using, investment products. These are very hard integrations to build on because they usually are run by country. And so you're then put in the guardrails of different laws and regulations that are around the financial system in each country, which makes this incredibly hard to scale. I think on top of this, it's very commoditized at this point. You have a lot of big competitors from Mint to YNAB, I believe it's called. And so these tools have really, dominated the financial space, not only because they have great products, but also because they've built great loyalty with customers and trust. And so for all these reasons, also given that there's really not much you can distinguish on a finance tracker, I'm going to put this on F. We're making some progress here. We still have quite a few to go. Okay, so the next one on this list is a meal planner. Now, I think that this one is really interesting because you have a few different things going on. You have a couple trends that are going on right now that align perfectly with this one. One is the trend of obviously being able to take pictures and get AI to analyze things. The other is just the increased want that people have to eat and be healthy. I think that these two things have a perfect opportunity for some kind of meal food planning tool. I don't really know of many that exist on the market. I know that there are, obviously the calorie tracking ones, but these ones differ because it's more around what you're eating, not necessarily how much you're eating. The app would be able to analyze the items in your fridge, and then based on that, it'd be able to recommend the different meals that you can make, and potentially even recommend, what groceries you can buy. So I think there's a huge, appeal for this, as like grocery shopping and cooking is a very obviously wide market thing. And so for that reason, I'm going to put this as our first A category. I think this is a really strong one to build. I think there's a lot of content that could be built around this. I think it's a very large audience that doesn't have any dominant apps in it, and I think if you build a good experience, it could be something that's that could do really well. The next one is AI tutors. So we obviously have quite a few of these at this point. A lot of kind of tools, including ChatGPT, that lets you create quizzes using AI. And so I think this is, again, pretty saturated at this point. Now, this is something that you could probably find some distinct edge. The other problem with an AI tutor is obviously you're selling to students, which inherently are hard to make money off of because they don't have a lot of money. And so you're kind of stuck between a lot of these free products that already exist, and trying to figure out a way to monetize is going to be really tricky. Though this is a pretty simple thing that you could build in a day or two. And there are a few different angles you could take with it. You could take the more chatbot experience. You could take the more kind of quiz experience. You could take something in between, but ultimately I think all these solutions exist already. And so I'm going to put this in our D category here. Okay, our next one on this list is the language buddy, or some kind of language trainer. Now again, I think this is a really interesting one because AI has made this much easier now with voice. You can now actually have conversations in your own native language and have it translate in real time. I also believe that as time goes on, there's going to be more nuances in how these AIs talk, whether it's different accents or different tonalities that would go along with the language that you're trying to learn, making the experience just way more well-rounded. I also think that there's not any clear, obviously you do have the big players in the space like Duolingo, but I do think there's probably some more niche audiences, particularly in the younger demographic, where you could really go hard on. Obviously language is a massive market, and so even if you can take a small sliver of that, I think you can have a solid business. And so I'm going to put this in the B category here. Also, this is not a super complicated one to build, especially with some of the new voice integration tools like 11 Labs that exist now that make it really easy. The next thing on this list is a focus timer. Now, there are a lot of these that exist, a lot of really free, simple to use timers, but I don't think there's been any one tool that has really dominated this market, because now there is Motion. Motion is a calendar AI tool that allows you to schedule in tasks, and it will use AI to automatically slot it in your calendar. Now, at this point, Motion is decently expensive, coming at around $20 to $30, and also now markets mainly towards bigger teams. And so there could be a better solo use case here for that solo founder that just wants to lock in using different methods, whether it's, Pomodoro timer, whether it's time boxing. Motion really only lets you do the time boxing thing, and for some people that may not be optimal. I think a focus timer could also allow you to niche down in these specific methodologies for productivity. You could also niche down by audience type, so you could, maybe go towards developers or go towards writers and build something in that's way more specific for them. This is also a relatively simple app to build. You don't need many integrations, and I think you can build a really beautiful experience and market it really nicely. I'm going to put this one in our A category here. The next one on this list is a relationship journal. Now, I think there are some really interesting opportunities right now. Particularly, one thing I'm seeing is the use of widgets on iPhones, where it's basically this experience where you don't even need to click into an app to interact with it. You can see it right then and there. I'm seeing these, image-based widget things. You're having like now ones that have the ability to write notes on it to your partner, and they can see it on their home screen. So I think these are really creative and emotionally driven actions that users clearly are willing to take. And it's a very sentimental experience that you can probably charge a decent amount of money for. Obviously, there's huge market potential for this. The virality is basically baked in. People love this stuff. I think this is one of the best niches to create content in, because everybody loves, relationship stuff, and, people are so invested in their relationships. And so if you can come up with a way to kind of build a product around that, I think it can be really powerful. What I would build for something like this is the ability to potentially, maybe it's something about the widgets and building kind of a version of that, or potentially just a simple app where people and relationships can keep track of what they're up to. Maybe it's a way for, long distance couples to kind of keep track of, what's going on, as obviously there's a lot of long distance and medium distance couples in the world. So maybe it's like a timeline of what's going on in their day, and they can kind of scroll through it without needing to send text back and forth, given that they're probably busy. So I really think that there's something in this area that it can be really smart, that easily, you can also incorporate some AI, but more importantly, it could be built really easily with Lovable. So I'm going to put this in our first S tier one. I think this is a really cool niche that somebody is going to build a really great product in. Okay, the next tool on this list is a resume builder. Now, what I like about this one is that I think that the AI component of what resumes is really exciting, because now with AI, you can essentially split test and have different variations of your resume depending on the job you're going for or the person you're talking to. And so if you're maybe going for a consulting role, you'd obviously want your resume to be more skewed to consulting. But if you're going for maybe a financial analyst role, you'd want it to be more fine-tuned to that. I really like this. I think that there's a big market both to students, also to working professionals, and so it makes it easy to market to either one or the other. I do think one of the issues with this one, though, is that the pricing component may be tricky. It's like figuring out how you price this and at what price point and who's going to pay for it, I think would be one of the trickier things, because if someone's looking for a job, they may not be in the means to be able to spend money on tools like this, and so it kind of puts you at a risk. But I still do think there's a pretty nice opportunity here, and so I'm going to put this at B. The next one is a content planner. Now, I think that this already does exist quite a lot as well. Now, what this would look like in my head would be some kind of tool that allows you to generate posts with AI, schedule them out automatically to the related platforms, potentially have some kind of ideation built into it so you can kind of think about what you're going to build. There are a few tools that do this. There's Typefully. There's a tool called Stanly that's by Stan.store. And so this is a decently competitive arena. I do think that there still is room to differentiate here, and clearly there is a market for it as content becomes a more and more important thing. But I do think that product-wise, marketing-wise, this is a little bit more saturated than I would like to see. And so I'm going to put this at a C. The next is an AI therapist. Now, how I would envision this working is some kind of either chat or voice experience where you can talk to some kind of AI therapist, essentially, or a chatbot that is designed and knows more about you than the average ChatGPT interaction, for example. And it's also specifically trained on best practices for therapy. Now, there are a few of these that exist already, and so again, this is a decently competitive space. I do think this is something that you could probably distinguish and be even more specific into the different kinds of maybe mental illnesses or things that people are trying to optimize for when it comes to their mental health. I also think, again, this is one that is really strong when it comes to creating content. Obviously, the theme of mental health and mental well-being is a very important topic right now, and I think you could create really interesting and fun content, especially if the AI therapist is actually good and has some kind of life and personality to it. So I'm going to put this one at a C, just because it is pretty saturated, but I think there is potentially still something that you could build around it. The next is a personal AI stylist. Now, again, I really like these AI image-based things because I think it plays into this new trend that we're seeing where AI is now able to analyze photos, which is a relatively new thing that people haven't fully caught on to yet. And so obviously for something like a personal stylist, that's something that people would have to pay, thousands of dollars every month to actually have a real personal stylist. But now AI can commoditize that for, your regular person. How I would see this working is pretty similar to the meal planner one, where you take a picture of your wardrobe, and based on the clothes in your closet, it's able to recommend you different outfits, potentially give you some inspiration, potentially give you some, places to shop to kind of match your style. You could potentially even have a feed of other people's closets and their outfits. That way you can get inspiration. I think there's a huge market here. I don't think there's anyone really playing it or doing it very well. I think there's a lot of content opportunities here. I think that you're playing into a massive trend with just the uprise of people creating fashion content, as well as the AI's ability to actually analyze fashion for your physique, for your style, etc. So I really like this one. If I had to build one, I think it would probably be this one. So I'd probably put this one in the S tier category. Another one that I really like, potentially even just as much, if not more, as the personal stylist, is this posture, the idea of having kind of your own built-in physiotherapist, a chiropractor that doesn't actually crack your back, of course, but something that actually analyzes your posture and gives you stretches and exercises to better it. Now, one really interesting kind of insight I've had with going through all these ideas is that some of them you may naturally do. Like this is an app, for example, where I actually went into ChatGPT and took pictures of my posture and asked it to recommend me different exercises, to which it did a really good job. And so those little trial things that you can do in ChatGPT allow you to see how the experience could actually be if you build it into an app. And so I really like this one. I think the posture and everybody has neck and back issues these days because we spend so much time on a computer, and people, really do care about making sure that their posture and strength overall is in a good place. So I'm going to put this one as an S tier. I don't think there's any good apps that are doing this well. I think the experience can be really interesting, and I really like this one. I think posture is going to become a huge trend if it's not already. The next is a book summarizer. Now we have a lot of these different AI tools and apps out there that help you kind of summarize books. This isn't necessarily a new idea. It is pretty highly commoditized. You can do this within GPT itself, and there's a really low, to my eyes, there doesn't seem like there's a huge need for something like this in an individual app. I think there are ways you could distinguish and have even more kind of curated experience to that person. Maybe you could have them recommend other books to kind of dive deeper into subjects and topics of a particular book that they're trying to read. Maybe there's a way to add in, obviously, like a reading list. So I'm sure there is ways to kind of build an experience around this, but I do think that for the most part, ChatGPT and some of these just like websites that are free online do a really good job of summarizing books. On the flip side, it's also a pretty easy thing to build. But again, I'm not sure that people would be willing to pay for this. And so I'm going to put this in our D category here, as unfortunately, I'm not sure there's a huge need for this in the market. Okay, the next one is around idea validation. Now, I think that this is something that we haven't seen AI do a good job of yet. I think people are struggling to get honesty and bluntness out of AI. And so I think that there's something probably around this that could be interesting. What I would do if I was trying to build this is I would have the kind of basic idea validation process built into it, where users can go through, it asks questions, and the app starts learning about what they're trying to build. But what I would also do is in the background, it starts gathering market and user data on what they're trying to build, and potentially other competitors that already exist. That way you can reference them in your kind of deep dive of this. That way you can have a full picture view of what you're building. Some cool people that do this, I know Greg Eisenberg has his tool that kind of gives you ideas and ranks them and all the different kind of opportunities. But again, it doesn't really leverage AI to the ability that you really can nowadays. I think the big challenge here is how do you make sure the AI is actually useful? How do you train it? How do you give it the integrations required to actually build something that can go and pull data from other sources and make sure that it's honest with its validation process? I would say if technically it can be executed, which is difficult, I think there's something to be done there. But I do think this is a pretty big technical challenge on building a product that is well-rounded enough to be good. So I'm gonna put this in the I think we'll put this in the C category for this one. Coming up next is a travel planner. Now, I think that this is a interesting one. There's definitely opportunity here to build something meaningful in the travel space. Obviously, I think one of the most exhausting parts of traveling is figuring out your itinerary and what you're going to do and making sure you see everything in the time that you have. On the flip side though, some people do enjoy the process of having kind of building out their own itinerary and figuring out what there is to do. It's almost part of the travel experience of educating yourself on what you want to do at a given place. And so I kind of question the need of this. I do think there is a group of travelers that would probably potentially utilize this, but I do think that this has been tried before, where you try to build some kind of travel planning tool, and I feel like it doesn't have the demand that people would assume. I think though that there's probably an opportunity to build some kind of affiliate or tour guide play into that, where it builds out your itinerary and then kind of upsells you into some kind of experience where you can actually pay to do these activities. Obviously, kind of some kind of Expedia thing, but a little bit more, AI driven, that uses your recommendations based on what it knows about you. So technically this actually isn't that hard to build. Actually, this would be one of the easier ones on this list. I think the content experience could be really interesting, having different creators going and basically spending a day somewhere using your app and going through the itinerary. I think there's a huge UGC kind of content play there. And so I'm going to put this one at a B. The reason it's not an A is because I question the utility of it. But I also like the go-to-market aspect. I think there's a lot of creativity that you can build into this. So that's where I put that. The next one is an AI nutritionist or some kind of AI health coach, if you will. I know these sound similar to the AI meal planning and the AI workout and all this stuff. What's missing in this kind of equation is some kind of tool that tracks, something like your blood sugar or, vitamins or things that maybe people don't often track, in the basic kind of MyFitnessPal experience, which is pretty much just around, macros and calories and stuff. I think that for your, real health enthusiasts, they'd be interested to see what supplements they should be taking and tracking their kind of results via blood work over time and having some kind of journal to keep track of that experience. Some people wear blood sugar monitors, and so being able to track what kind of foods affect what. I think there's probably some kind of experience here that can be done. I think some of the issues are potentially some privacy and security concerns on the build itself. But I do think that this is a huge market that people haven't really built in too much. And I see a lot of growth in this area of very narrow health focused people that want to track everything and be optimized. So I would probably put this one in the C category as well. And then last but not least, we have a mind map builder. Now what this is some kind of mind map, kind of like a Miro whiteboard experience where you can connect your different thoughts, maybe use AI to kind of think about other things that you haven't thought about yet and expand the mind map on its own. I think that there probably are some opportunities here. There are definitely some prominent mind map tools already, but I'm not sure how well of a job they do, both go to market, but also AI. I know mind maps are more of a niche thing. And so I wonder if there's an opportunity to kind of, through content and good distribution to make it something that people actually use more, because I do think there is some benefit to it of being able to think of thoughts that maybe you haven't thought of before and be able to expand your thoughts and connect them. So I actually think that there's some opportunity here, probably slightly technically challenging, but I think something that you could probably still vibe code. So I'm going to put this in our B category here. And there we have it. We have our, I believe, 21 different apps ranked from S to F. As you can see, there's 3 really strong opportunities that I think that if I were to build something, I would focus on one of the S or A tier categories. I think that each of these have their own strengths and weaknesses, even the ones in the C and B categories. And most importantly, all these tools, they can all work. And I think at the end of the day, you also want to build something that you're passionate about. And if you aren't passionate about any of these different app ideas, I wouldn't go and do them. But if you do have one that maybe particularly stands out, both from an interest perspective, but also maybe you have ideas on how to make it better because it's personal to you, I think that that should also weigh heavy into what you build. So with all that being said, if you want to build any of these products, I recommend recommend using Lovable. This is by far the easiest way to get started and build. I have a code down below that you can use in order to get your project started with some small discounts from me and the Lovable team. And also, if you want to learn more about AI tools, watch my video on my favorite AI tools down below, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.